tonight's program, we talk about the Romulan faction, obviously.
The Romulans are big on my mind this week because of what they got released.
I take on the most popular Foundry mission of all time.
You've never played that?
I had never played it. And the boys go off on a tangent about boots.
Your choices are extremely limited.
Join us for the Foundry Roundtable. Hello and welcome to Episode 8 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is Sparkle Pony Greendragoon.
Woohoo! Sparkle Pony!
Yeah, we charge $25 for you. And the leader of the EPO Galactic Domination Conspiracy, Markhawkman.
Okay then.
And the most laid-back Tholian you'll ever meet, Hippiejohn.
It's really hot in here.
By design, I should think. And our guest today is a longtime Foundry author and fleet mate of mine, Woody Valley.
Okay, everyone.
And I thought we'd probably begin tonight with talking about what everybody's talking about, which is Romulans. Of course, we know that a new Romulan faction is on the way in May. What we don't know yet is whether or not we'll be able to make Foundry missions for them right away. I made sure to put that in the Ask Cryptic. Hopefully they will respond to that on Friday. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Would you make Foundry missions for a Romulan faction?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
I don't know if I can
definitive.
get one. I'm still working on getting one Federation series done.
I was going to say that's a pretty definitive yes there, Mark. If we can make Foundry missions for Romulans, I will.
I've already
right out of the gate.
I've already started writing one.
You gonna adapt the Major Recall?
Yeah, I think actually my plan is I'm going to introduce her in a Federation Foundry mission, and then kind of leave it a little bit open-ended, have you thwart her evil plan, but she escapes, and then have her as sort of the main villain in a series of Romulan missions.
Cool.
Awesome.
And of course, our other piece of news is the beginning of the next Foundry Challenge, which was just announced a
couple hours ago.
Yeah, like a couple hours ago, from our perspective, which is pretty much, it's a pretty simple thing. It's just make a Foundry mission for small craft, shuttles and fighters and whatnot.
Which I think is awesome. I don't know that I'll be able to make one, but I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think you always need small craft missions. I mean, I loved Kirkvat's one that he did not too long ago. And,
I liked the one from the Foundry Challenge a little while ago. I think it was 4 or 5, something about Admiral Smith goes to war or something. I don't remember the title of it, but it was a small craft mission again. So.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have time to do this one, but I'm very excited to see what people come up with.
Well, we might even talk about some of the things that you can do to approach a small craft mission and things that you can do to make it work.
What we need to do for like a future podcast is we get somebody on here who's made a small craft mission.
Mm-hmm.
And have them talk about it.
Kirkvat's made one.
Yeah. I've been trying to get Kirkvat on, but Wednesdays are not good for him, but we'll see if we can finagle something. All right, moving on. Start with what are we working on? And we'll start with our guest, Woody Valley. Have you been working on anything Foundry related?
I have. I've just last night I just completed my first map of new Foundry project I'm working on. It's going to be called Beautiful. So based around a Orion female. Yes, probably got tied in. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's going to be going on in the mission?
Well, there's a song by an Australian band called Soulframe that did a song called Beautiful. Some of you people here in Australia might have actually heard of this song. A band's called Soulframe because the lead singer of it, Muddo, he's a former Australian Idol contestant back in 2008. Became a finalist. So he's done a song there called "Beautiful," based around appearances and stuff like that, how you dress and all that. So I think I could tie that into a Foundry mission based around a Orient female slave girl. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Excellent. What you said you've just finished a map for it. What kind of map have you done?
I just set up a scene of. I'll try not to give too much away of my story, but it was just a Klingon did an attack on a Federation outpost, and they tried to get it back, and one of the wounded people was this female Orion that you base the story around. So you get her and take her away as prisoner, and get treated wounds and all that.
Well, sounds great. Mark, what have you been working on lately?
Other than doing research into the capabilities of the Neverwinter Foundry over the weekend, pretty much the only thing I've been doing is working on building Brigadoon Castle. But not really a whole lot of making things in the Foundry lately.
So building a castle, huh? That's got to be difficult.
Not as difficult as you would think, because some of the Gates of Grethor exterior props are actually designed to be used for the outer walls of a castle.
Oh, I had not thought of using those. That's pretty good. All right, Hippiejohn, what have you been working on?
What have I been working on? Maps. I'm trying a new approach, which is making all of the physical spaces that I'm going to use for my story be complete. And maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist, but I keep going back over them and saying, oh, that doesn't look right. That doesn't. So the time that I've spent in the Foundry this week has been tweaking maps, and the maps that I'm tweaking now are space maps, which are fun. I like making them. I didn't used to.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But people have given me a lot of good advice about, how space maps work, and my biggest issue that I had with them, I'm just kind of ignoring, which was how do you deal with people that are going up and down, in their vertical axis, and where you're placing your waypoints and such. And most players are going to go to what you ask them to go to. Most players aren't going to be me and fly around and check out the entire map. So I'm letting a little bit of my how do I make this work go, and once I did that, space maps just became a lot of fun to make.
I find I've had a lot of success with putting, anything that's an objective, putting that on sort of one plane, one horizontal plane, and then anything that's background, that's scenery, kind of varying that up vertically.
That's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah. And no reach markers.
Reach markers are tough.
Reach markers are too easy to miss vertically, so I just use interacts.
Yeah, I will use a beacon. It's option.
Yeah, I've taken out reach markers and added in invisible objects and such, and invisible blocks, putting them over an asteroid or with an asteroid or something, because those at least you can hit that V key and find. And if you're careful in the design of the map, you're not going to put something that's like too big that they're going to detect, which isn't what they need. So that's kind of what I've been doing. Barring all else, someone can hit their V key, find the next objective.
Yeah, that's actually a problem I've had in some Cryptic missions, is that one specific mission, you have to find a big asteroid in this gigantic asteroid field. Oh, and pushing the V key doesn't work to find the location. So the first time I played that mission, I could not find the thing. It was literally like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah,
Why?
The
thing is, it actually was pretty close to the level plane that you start out on in the mission. The problem was that you have to fight several waves of enemies, and that ended up causing me to be off the plane and out in the middle of I don't know where. And
that's what I've been running into.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, we all go up and down when we're fighting stuff.
That's what I've been running into is that's why I stopped using reach markers and said, no matter what I do, if I put a fight, if I put space mobs in there for people to fight, they're going to go up, they're going to go down, they're going to get off of that plane where I've put everything, so put them in as actual interacts that they can find. So that, and it was finding a Foundry mission that had a huge, like, 500-foot block over something, and the actual interact was that you needed to get to was much smaller, and all your V key did was keep bringing you back to that giant block, and that made me say, oh, you have to be careful about how you do this.
All right, Greendragoon, what have you been working on?
Unfortunately, I have had incredibly little time in the Foundry. I actually went on a road trip this weekend, which had me away from Stowe for most of it, plus a lot of other real-life things I've had to deal with. I started playing around with building a conference room, and I've basically been kind of looking at the Cryptic made one that we see in the First Contact missions and that one Klingon diplomacy mission, not Klingon, Cardassian diplomacy mission, and seeing, not that I could actually recreate it in any accuracy, but still kind of coming up with something that has the same general feel to it.
Like kind of the observation lounge on the starship?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I've been working on, which is Foundry related, but not in the Foundry. I started a little thread on the forums, is because I want to write some Romulan missions, I figured I needed to know, all the plot stuff in Stowe leading up to where we are now. Which, of course, we don't exactly know of what the plot for the Romulan faction, the playable faction, is going to be, but we know all of the missions that we've gone through so far. So I've been slowly replaying mostly through those, and writing little summaries, and trying to figure out how it all fits together into sort of a cohesive plot, as kind of a resource for anybody who wants to take into account the in-game lore when they start writing their Romulan missions. Not everybody's going to want to do that. Some people don't care about the in-game lore. Some people, like me, I like to make my missions kind of fit in with everything, so it's kind of seamless for the player. I'm kind of, right about halfway through the opening mission series, the sort of lieutenant commander level Romulan missions, and I've started the thing that I never really thought I would do, which is the new Romulus reputation. Because I'm by and large not a fan of grind, but I understand that grind is a choice, and this time I choose to do it because I want to experience those missions that you can get. And I've already gotten to Tier 1 and I've seen that mission. I want to experience those missions and be able to do a little summary of those and add that in. So I am doing the Romulan rep. Hopefully I will get it done before the faction drops in May. I don't know if with the time gating, I don't know if that'll be possible.
One question, of course, though, is everyone kind of assumes that the new Romulan faction will be born out of Morion and that whole story. But what if the Romulan faction leads up to Morion?
Hard to say at this point.
I'm thinking that the Romulan faction will probably be based someplace like Raytor 3, just because of the fact that Morion does not have the facilities to support it. I mean, because the fleet they have is actually not Morihan's fleet. It's actually that Riemann guy's fleet.
Yeah, it's Obisek. And
Obisek's fleet operates headquartered in the Vault, not at Morihan. So I'm thinking that the playable faction will be based somewhere else and not directly connected to them at all.
I'm in agreement with Mark here. I don't think they're going to be based out of New Romulus at all.
I almost wonder if, it's going to be one of those things where at the very beginning you're sort of, a Romulan military officer who used to be with the old regime and now is with the new one.
Well, everyone makes the assumption that the screenshot of Sela implies that she has come back from her Iconian excursion. I'm curious whether or not this is pre or post kidnapped Sela, because if it's
what the timeline is going to be for the Romulan players.
Because one of the things I've been thinking about, and I would not be entirely surprised if In Cryptic's attempt to fill out the Romulan faction, that the featured episodes have had Romulan versions made, and if that were to happen, then the Romulan faction would need to start back at the beginning, like the Klingons and Federation do.
Well, the thing about those featured episodes is they could almost, I mean, if you're talking about the Deferi one and the what's the other guys, the Davidian one, you could almost set those at really any time. They're not things that have to fit within a certain timeline. Now the Cloaked Intentions one is.
Yeah.
And I would, if I were them, I would not make exact copies of those for Romulan players because it just wouldn't make sense. But
it depends on how
the Davidian one, they certainly could just make a straight copy.
The Cloaked Intentions could work, considering how incredibly fractured the Romulans are.
Yeah, so it's possible. It would require a lot more rewriting though than the other two.
We'll just have to see in May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I expect a rewrite I expect at least with the 4 featured episodes, the 4 featured series, I expect that they'll all have minor rewrites to potentially major rewrites with the Romulan one for ways to include the Romulans in all 4 of them.
Well, the Dominion story arc would be rather easy. Simply add a Romulan to the negotiation table, because that was actually one thing that I was looking for the first time they ran the Dominion featured episodes. I look at the table, see the people represented, and I'm like, wait a second, shouldn't there be a Romulan in the room somewhere?
Or at least some dialogue saying why they weren't. But yeah, they could easily add one there. So those other ones would be easy to do with really not many rewrites at all.
Yeah, the Breen ones, you would probably change the dialogue a little bit simply because of the fact that the Breen absolutely hate the Romulans for reasons that have never been explained. Don't know why, but they do.
Thinking about how to do a Romulan mission and not knowing exactly what the plot of it's going to be, I thought, well, how can I sort of take this off on a tangent that won't affect anything? And I thought, well, maybe I'll, set it on, the theoretical border between Romulan and Cardassian space. Because supposedly there is one, according to Deep Space Nine, even though it's not on any of our maps.
I was going to say, don't you have the Federation in the way?
Yeah.
If you look, let's see, right after Sisko gets the Romulans to enter the war, there's something about, on their borders. They talk about their borders as if they have...
Yeah, they make reference that the
it's just
Dominion is crossing into Romulan space to attack Federation ships.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that Cardassian territory borders Romulan territory. It just means that the Dominion... Well, actually, at that point in time, weren't they having, Dominion fleets doing incursions pretty deep into Federation territory?
Yeah, and there were lines about crossing Romulan space to do it.
Which is weird.
It was very weird. But I figure if the professional writers from Deep Space Nine can fudge that, so can I.
Well, do you remember the episode "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield" from the original series?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, did you pay attention in the episode to note the age of the 2 people who were fighting and their one-on-one combat was...
Hold on a sec, guys. I got a phone call.
We can keep going, I imagine.
Yeah, but did you pay attention to Lokai and Bo, whatever? Did you pay attention to what their age was?
No.
It's been a while since I've seen that episode.
I was going to say, yeah.
Both of them were indirectly stated to be 10,000 years old.
Star Trek writers play fast and loose with canon and time.
Especially when
their civilization died while they weren't looking.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they specifically said that in the episode, is that while those 2 guys were engaged in their duel across the galaxy, their home planet was engaged in a larger scale version of the same conflict, and except on their homeworld, it ended up with mutual annihilation, which was incredibly weird because Kirk and crew came to the conclusion that those two were the last members of their race and that they still hated each other so much that they would rather fight to the death among the ruins of their civilization than try to rebuild their civilization.
Reminds me of a few people I've met on the forums.
Exactly.
Actually, it reminds me of a DS9 episode similar to that sort of storyline too, where they had that Bajoran High Priest.
Oh, you mean Opaka?
Who got left behind. Yeah. Just remember recently watching that episode a couple of weeks back.
It leads me to think about, potential Romulan storylines and potential ways to approach that too, because I suspect that New Romulus and, Titan, Morion, the whole storyline there is going to be something that the Romulan player characters can opt to follow that reputation system and that story if they want, but that they're going to be centered and based somewhere else. So you really got a couple of different approaches to picking up from the ashes of their society, potentially, in the Tal Shiar and in Titan's, unification idea. And it gives me the idea that there are going to be people on both sides who would rather die than accept the other side's way of doing things. Well, that's an approach.
Well, prior to Drogon doing that thread he did, I was actually spending a lot of time pondering this myself, simply because of them making that official announcement.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've noted from playing the Romulan featured episode series and the missions on New Romulus is that the current state of the Romulans is that after the destruction of Romulus, they ended up more or less in a state of civil war and are split into at least 3 factions.
I definitely pick up a couple factions, yeah.
I say at least 3 because I'm not really sure which faction Sela would be a part of.
Because the military.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. If there are 3 factions, the Cloaked Intentions is the name of the Romulan featured episodes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That episode series deals with your enemy is the Tal Shiar, basically. The Tal Shiar working with the Iconians, who quite potentially kidnap Sela at the end of everything. If there are really 3 factions, then very possibly the Romulan faction that players are going to be able to access is going to be a faction that is indeed led by Sela. That would make, if Sela is not working with the Tal Shiar, that would make the Cloaked Intention episodes something that Romulan players could play.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because the Tal Shiar are currently allied with the bad guys.
Yeah.
So players will not be able to play as them.
The Romulan idea I have is a James Bond story. The Tal Shiar are the best spies in the galaxy. There are no better, as far as I'm concerned, and making the player character take on a mission for them and make it one of those that your clues lead you all over the galaxy to exciting and exotic locales, to a final confrontation with the bad guy where you're the spy and the hero through the whole thing. That's probably what I'm going to do as far as a Romulan mission, because it will allow me to stay away from whatever they're coming up with for story as far as canon goes.
I could actually visualize having a few missions in there where you do actually do something because a Tal Shiar agent mentions that it might be a good idea. Mm-hmm. However, this would be something kind of like the missions that involve Franklin Drake, where you don't do it because he's your boss, You do it because after he explains the situation, you decide that it's a good idea.
Right. I tend to err on the side of trying to avoid whatever the newest Cryptic storyline is, whatever they're trying to show us. I think it's why I had trouble really coming up with a storyline for the Tholian challenge, because I don't feel like I have Cryptic's story yet. That means that with the Romulan faction, until I know what Cryptic's story is, I don't want to try to work within the bounds of what their particular chronology is yet, until I really see what they release as far as story goes. Because I feel like
we don't know exactly yet.
Yeah, I feel like if we if I, as an author, I'm thinking mainly for me, if I accidentally put story into my missions that contradicts or runs in some way parallel to something that they're doing in a way that doesn't work, it's going to, affect my mission negatively, and I'm going to end up wanting to pull it. So any story that I'm coming up with, I'm really just flat out avoiding whatever it is, trying to come up with ideas that have nothing to do with whatever Cryptic could possibly be thinking.
Well, but what the stuff I've managed to piece together from it is, one, there's the Tal Shiar faction, because, like I said before, they're the bad guys, yada, yada, yada. They more or less are trying to help the Iconians take over the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was talking about before, we have the guys who are based on Molrihan, who, they're basically being pacifists who are trying to build a new civilization because their old homeworld got destroyed, and they're almost like colonists, and they're not really a proper military. So you wouldn't end up working for them, but you might end up helping them, probably via the reputation system.
Well,
I imagine it's going to be.
They do have Romulan ships in the patrol dailies in Taudea.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they've shown us a lot of the models already. We've seen some of the images of ships that are coming.
They do, but they don't have what you would call a full military force, because they have what are basically, a few weak patrol vessels and nothing else. They don't really have any, they don't have enough of a military presence to be able to actually keep out invaders. That's just part of the reason why they're getting help from the Federation and the Klingon Empire.
I mean, I guess we have just, at this point, we have a ton of potential stories that authors can tell. I saw a post that said people really should start designing for Romulans, even though we don't know yet whether we're going to be able to release Romulan missions. I'm certain that eventually we're going to be able to. So probably designing missions for a Romulan faction is a good idea for everyone. As far as what it's bringing to the Foundry, we've got tons of story potential that suddenly opens up with a brand new faction. But in terms of what it brings to the Foundry, look at our details and look at what they will have to give us if they want us to have a Romulan faction. We don't have what it takes to design stuff for Romulan missions at this point.
I don't know. I kind of disagree, because we've got walls.
Yeah, we have a lot of Romulan products.
We have a lot of Romulan assets. We have all kinds of generators and consoles and all kinds of pre-built maps. So we've got space stations. We've got a lot.
Okay.
If you look through it.
You have enough Romulan interiors that you could actually make, whole missions using the Romulan interiors we already have.
Mm-hmm.
I really foresee it bringing stuff to the Foundry, though. I think that it has to.
I think there's things that are already in game that we absolutely should have. First being New Romulus, of course. I was playing the warehouse mission last night, which is the first mission you get to in the rep system, and that is a fantastic map.
Mm-hmm.
with shuttles and all. And I love it.
They've recently added some really great maps to the game that I don't want to, I wouldn't have wanted to say, the warehouse map, because there are still people out there who haven't played through any of the reputation system, and they get to they get to that level 1 or whatever, they're going to go, wow, this is a really cool map, and that happens throughout the reputation system. There's some really cool stuff that I would love to see us be able to play with in the Foundry, but I think that part of the reason we can't is because they want that reaction that you had, that, wow, this map is really nice, when somebody gets there for the first time.
Not to mention, some of those maps are incredibly cluttered, which is one of those pet peeves I have with stock maps, is just dealing with all the pre-existing objects.
It would be nice to get an empty version.
Yes.
Without props, but with the shuttles. But we need the shuttle prop, too.
That's something that someone mentioned about the Deep Space Nine map, is because a lot of those maps, when you open it and look at it in the editor, you see 50 or 60 different crates in random locations, and you have to plan your mission around the giant stacks of crates that are in various locations.
Yeah.
I mentioned the Impact Nor map. I mentioned the Impact Nor map earlier, and one of the distinctive features of the Impact Nor map is that the level designers built stacks of crates in the hallways to force you to take paths other than simply walking down the main hallway.
That would be kind of an annoyance, wouldn't it?
I don't know if that's necessarily why they're there.
For a Cryptic mission, that's fine. But for a Foundry asset, that's annoying.
To have the crates there and have them immovable, yeah. I tend to try to avoid the maps that have too many props.
So I was gone for a second, had a phone call. Have we talked about missions yet?
No, we talked a lot about Romulus or the Romulan faction, kind of ended. We're now talking about how it might affect the Foundry.
Maybe I'll edit that part and stick it at the beginning when we're talking about that. All right, but let's go to missions.
What have we been playing?
I will start off because I have a very brief one. So,
okay.
I decided to do something a little different from how I've been doing things. I've been going to the under 5 reviews and doing some unknown missions. This time I decided to go with what is probably arguably the most recognized and most popular story mission that there has ever been in the Foundry, which is First Buzz and then Effect.
You've never played that?
I had never played it.
Wow.
Isn't that the mission that has something like 100,000 reviews?
It's 50,000.
50,000.
Yeah, it's a little above 50.
Rogue's a good friend. He hangs in the chat rooms, and we give him crap about his 50,000 plays. But there's a reason. It's a great mission.
Yep.
I really enjoyed it, and ironically, one of the Massively columnists just also played it, and Galactus' mission. So, there's a reason that it's so popular, and it's a good mission. It's a great sort of inventive use of mechanics. I never would have thought of using, incorporating the player's ship getting destroyed into the intentional parts of the mission,
Yeah.
And, it's great. And I want to try and start getting to play those, the high-profile missions that I just never had the time to play. It's one of those things where you can limit yourself, or you can, because, there's no harm in playing the popular missions. They're popular for a reason.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And RogueEnterprise is a great author, I'd say. It's really not the most...
Can't disagree with you.
...complex of map building, He did it. It's been up there for 2 years, at least. I mean, but it's a good example of simple map building and reusing maps effectively. Bringing something new because it's time loop. Everybody knows it's time loop. And he brings new things into each time loop. I really appreciated that. So it's not just boring the same thing every time, over and over. So, That's mine. Great mission. Let's go with John. What have you been playing?
I'm wondering if anybody else is going to say they did something different this week. I just decided that this week I was going to play the Foundry for fun. Play a bunch of missions that had lots of reviews, that were popular, that had good ratings, and that's what I did. And the thing I would want to talk about is earlier today, before I got my day started, I had a chance to play through the final two missions in Captain Revo's 5-part series. The Worst of All Worlds, 9 of Deep Space, Emissary of the Pa Wraiths, the last one being This Far No Further, which is one of the highest rated missions on the list right now. It's way up there. And I can say that it's a really good series. It's really fun to play. And it's been up for a while, and it has some, it has some spelling errors throughout, which for me don't take away, from the rating. I just mention it. Go back, go edit it, because there are people who do take away points and ranking for stuff like that. There are a few spelling errors, but it's obviously very well thought out from the very beginning to the very end. It's one of those, when I first started playing the series, when I played the first couple of episodes, I was caught. I wanted to keep playing. The characters and the villains are all very interesting, and the situations are great. And Captain Revo is very good at using the things that the Foundry can do to make maps interesting, and just make things that you're doing on those maps interesting. So all of that, all of the technical aspects, all of that, I had a lot of fun playing through it. And the story didn't really, it had my attention, but it didn't catch me until the third part, which I guess happens with some stories. And there are famous stories out there that I could name that they didn't catch me at first. Famous sci-fi or other series and things that they didn't catch me at first. But once I saw the narrative begin to unfold, suddenly I realized why the first parts were there. And it has a very satisfying end. That to me is one of those important things. You have to really feel like, if you're going to invest a lot of time in an entire series of 5 or more missions, you want to feel like you have defeated the villain and it was a great fight and the getting there was challenging, and I was very satisfied at the end of this mission. I felt like I had accomplished something, and it's one of those that story now is canon for my character. That happened, kind of thing, because it was really cool. And I would suggest everyone play it. It's the 5-part Captain Revo series that begins, I think, with Worst of All Worlds. So, really good stuff. And like you say, there's a reason the high-rated missions are high-rated, and there's nothing wrong with playing them. So,
Woody Valley, did you play anything?
Yeah.
Not recently. I was going to play Basag's timey-wimey wobbly thingamajig mission before we start, but time beat me to it. So I'm going to be playing that as soon as that's all we finish here. So other than that, I haven't really played anything in a while in the Foundry. Actually, it's just the that change in the not turning in turning in a mission. Do the turn in now for the 50 feet marks and 960. The lithium is sort of like maybe turn off the Foundry a bit. I was actually getting into the habit of at least playing one mission per day or something like that during that time, but with the changes, it's just maybe turn off the playing Foundry missions. But I should get back into it, shouldn't I?
Well, I find that interesting. The changes had the exact opposite effect on me. I started playing them more. I finish almost all of my dilithium just playing Foundry missions.
Yeah, you actually get more dilithium now for some missions than you do before they changed that.
Yeah, I average, like, one of them, I'll pick a spotlight, and I usually get over 2,000 for that, usually over 2,500. And then anything else that I choose to play, usually, because I choose to play, a story type of mission, I'll get 1440 for every mission that I play. So, yeah, it's pretty great. I play it more.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm back. I don't know why it cut out for some reason.
So you
Makes no
didn't
sense.
leave?
No, I was talking and wondering why no one was understanding that I was talking.
That's
I hope-
awkward silence.
Yeah, real quick, did my review of Revo's mission come through?
Pretty sure.
Okay, because I heard, like, when I finished talking, there was just, like, silence. I had to mute and unmute to get people's voices again.
Well, I hope so anyway. Let me real quick go check the laptop, make sure everything's okay.
Oh, okay.
I keep the laptop in another room.
Oh, the joys of pre-recording.
Well, it's great because we can edit all this out. So
Someday we'll be ready to be live.
Yeah, and then we'll have to deal with even greater technical challenges.
Find someone else to deal with those technical challenges. Leave us to do this talking.
I think that's how Ceridium ends up on so many podcasts.
Probably. Kind of his thing. It's like what he likes to do. Oh, did we just lose Drogan? Did I just lose everyone again?
No, well,
Yeah,
I still hear you.
yeah.
we should be okay. Check the
Okay.
laptop, and it's still going. So
Yay!
okay. Markhawkman, have you been playing any missions?
In the Still Foundry, no. But, well,
But you've been playing in the Neverwinter Foundry, right? Or playing
Yeah.
missions?
I actually
Tell us about
got to test out the new campaign feature in the Neverwinter Foundry over the weekend. I'm just going to talk about what I played.
Ah, okay, cool.
I can't create things in the Neverwinter Foundry, obviously, because that's not open for beta testing.
Right.
But I can talk about what I played. The campaign feature works in much the same way as the mission contacts for the featured episode series.
Mhm.
The difference is that you leave your review of the first part of it, and there's this checkbox to start the second part of it as soon as you finish your review. And then it just automatically loads the next chapter of the mission, and you can just immediately start it without having to go through the trouble of looking it up and finding the author and all that great stuff, which is a very quick and easy way of doing it. I played through a 3-episode mission series, probably actually faster than you would for a actual official mission series. But it worked out pretty well. Also, they had some fun stuff with the way the environmental assets work in Neverwinter that I hope gets brought over to the Still Foundry. Like, doors you can open and close. Because I'm not sure of the exact way it works, but at least doors have 2 positions that the object will exist in, and you can interact with the object to switch it from the open position to the closed position and back again, however many times. I hope that they bring that functionality to the Star Trek Online Foundry, but we'll see.
There's definitely some features that I'd love to have.
Well, the just in playing the beta, the thing that I found the most attractive about the Foundry quite literally was my ability to subscribe to an author. If I play a mission that I really enjoy, I can just simply subscribe to the author, apparently. I haven't seen how it works yet because I've only seen people with one mission up there, but I think that's a really great feature.
And that was something kind of funny that I found in First Cause Then Effect, which was at the very end, after you had hit the last objective and the review window comes up, an interact object also spawns that says other missions by Rogue Enterprise. And you click on it and it gives you a dialogue that says, has options to descriptions of all his missions. And it's like, well, once we get this subscribe to author thing, we won't really need that.
We won't really need it, but that's a
It's
great
so
idea.
thing to do.
Yeah.
And I may do that in mine. Shameless self-promotion, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, another interesting thing I noticed in the Neverwinter Foundry was they had some really interesting ways of spawning enemies. I mean, it's not stuff that you would really want to directly port into Star Trek Online, but having the ability to do enemy spawns that use similar techniques would be nice. I mean, one that I saw more than I wanted to, but was actually pretty cool enemy spawn technique was you go into a room and these coffins on the side of the room suddenly open up when you walk into the room. I mean, because the coffins, if you look at the room before you enter, they're, closed. You walk in, the enemies spawn, the coffins open, and the enemies walk out of them. They don't appear on top of the coffins like they would if you were doing, the fancy tricks in the Star Trek Online Foundry. They actually crawl out of them.
I noticed that too.
That is a cool effect.
They also did that with stone sarcophaguses and a few other types of things, like having spiders that are actually spawned by killing a big spider that's carrying an egg sac on it. You kill the big spider, and then a bunch of babies pop out of the egg sac and start attacking you.
That's in the Cryptic missions as well. That's one of the monsters over there, which I like that whole
We should have Horda mobs like that.
where you destroy something and a bunch of little things come out. Yeah, those were really
Or to
cool.
reproduce that way.
But it could be like a Horda with a bunch of eggs on it, and if you kill it, a bunch of little Horda spawn and start attacking you.
That'd be
Or
awesome.
something more like the sentient stand from that Next Generation episode.
Oh, you mean the early one?
What?
Well, there was this one episode of the Next Generation where the Enterprise goes to this planet that the Federation is trying to terraform to figure out what's wrong with the terraforming process. And they find out that there's a layer of the soil on the planet that is inhabited by some sort of sentient sand, and a sample of the sand they brought onto the Enterprise attempts to take over the ship.
It's the Big Bags of Mostly Water episode.
Yeah. Yes, because the sample that they brought to the Enterprise, over time, it turns into this big crystal globe thing with a bunch of spikes sticking out of it. But anyway, so that fighting for something like that, I would actually kind of sort of expect it to do something like what the spiders do, because, you smash the crystal globe, and, oh wait, now there are pieces of the crystal globe attacking.
Yeah, like shards of the crystalline entity or something.
Yeah, kind of like that, except a lot smaller.
Yeah. All right. Greendragoon, have you played anything lately?
I have not. Unfortunately, real life has not allowed me to get into the game much lately.
All right.
Aww.
Well, we shall
It
move.
happens from time to time.
We shall move right on to discussion topics. So, who wants to go first?
Well, I've
We
got
got a
a
guest.
topic.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got a topic that I thought might be kind of interesting. We've talked in the past about writing for like the captain and the bridge officers, but something that I've been kind of wondering about, and this is actually something I consider to be one of my weaknesses, is writing believable character dialogue. And I'm talking about like for NPCs and whatnot that you have in your story.
That's something that I'm sure a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
Because, it's sort of... Because Star Trek characters don't necessarily talk like we do today. It's tough to find that cadence, especially with technobabble. It's tough to find a rhythm and a cadence in your dialogue. Because, of course, everybody's reading it in their own voice. I don't know. It's very difficult, but I tend to not write like Star Trek characters would necessarily speak. I tend to take my dialogue influences from more like Stargate or Babylon 5, where they talk more like we do today, because I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit more relatable. I don't know, what are you guys' approach to that?
I feel like there's two things you can do. One is to accept that people on a starship aren't going to talk like we do, and that any kind of a dramatic presentation, any kind of a story is going to have its own cadence and its own way of speaking, and to kind of just embrace that and maybe go with it. Look at recent modern pop culture. Everything that Joss Whedon writes sounds the same. I like a lot of what he writes, but he's got this very particular cadence to the way that he writes. And that's just, he's made the decision to just go with that. And it's not the way that real people speak. And the way that people speak on Star Trek, like you say, it's not the way that real people speak. So it's either embrace that or try to go with something that sounds more like real people having a conversation. For me, the easiest way to do that in anything that I've ever written, not just, a Foundry mission or a Foundry idea, is to grab a friend and read the dialogue out loud, back and forth with someone else, and see if it sounds natural.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that I imagine a lot of authors very rarely do. But it's something that in writing they tell you to do a lot, is to read it out loud, or have somebody else read it out loud.
If you want it to sound like two people speaking, naturally would sound speaking, you have to read it out loud and say to yourself, wow, people don't talk like that. And then change your dialogue if you really want it to be, natural speaking.
Or, and of course, the other, if you want to make it sound like Star Trek, then, turn your TV on and have some Star Trek going in the background while you're writing. And imagine it's one of those characters. Or something that I like to do when I am creating a character is think about, okay, if I were putting this on TV or in the movies, who would I cast to play this part? And, I don't use that actor's likeness, obviously, because that would be against EULA, but I think about their speaking tone and their rhythm and their voice and their accent, even. And I try and write it as if that actor was speaking it.
That's probably what a lot of people do for, film and television, too, is write with the actor in mind.
I've heard of them doing that, and then sometimes they get that actor, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I just a couple of days ago, I found a sort of a new way to amuse myself, which was reading H.P. Lovecraft, which is, sort of horror science fiction, in using Morgan Freeman's voice in my head. Just absolutely hilarious. And so, get somebody else's voice going in your head as you're writing this, and use that voice, make it come out through the writing. So, they say hearing voices isn't a bad thing, but if you're writing fiction, I don't think so.
If you're writing fiction, you're expected to hear voices.
Absolutely.
Well,
you have
hearing voices isn't only a bad thing when the voices talk when you don't want them to.
So, this whole idea of imagining what the actor that would be, I'm already doing that with the thing that I'm writing right now. This whole idea, my villain is the Cardassian. He's a very old man. And ever since I created him in my mind, mainly because the large inspiration behind creating him is the movie Apt Pupil. Ever since I created him, I've imagined this Cardassian played by Ian McKellen as an old man.
God,
and
cool
that's the voice, and that's the voice that I hear every time that I'm writing dialogue for him.
You absolutely must have a line in there now that is something like, "Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?"
So what it is for me is I'm not trying to make him necessarily sound real. I'm trying to make him sound like Ian McKellen real. I'm trying to write a movie rather than trying to write a real conversation between people, I guess, is what it is. So.
And of course, whatever you're doing, it has to sort of feel right for the situation, for the characters. You know, if it's a heightened emotional thing, you don't want them talking like it's a day at the beach. You know, if your ship is under attack, you don't want people being casual. But, you know, because if your ship is under attack, you can generally assume that they are very trained Starfleet officers. They're not, you know, maybe one of them is panicking. They won't all panic. They'll all kind of react differently to stress, but most of them probably won't panic. They might raise their voices or something. You always want to look for that. How would it feel if it's in this situation? What would they be doing? How would their voices change? What would their inflections be?
I think we have a bonus with NPCs too. To go back to your original question there, Dragoon, we have a bonus with NPCs because there's someone that we're creating, and we've talked previously about, like you said, about writing for someone's bridge officers or their captain and how difficult that is. But when we're dealing with the villains of the story or the NPCs and the allies they meet along the way, these are our creations. They're the characters that we're putting out there, so we can determine the ways in which they speak and the cadences and just the way that we imagine them sounding, and we can do things like give them, you know, a more emotional reaction to something or what have you, because they're original creation. We're not trapped by not stepping on the player's image or, you know, thought of their bridge officer. Just a thought.
Unless, of course, you're trying to go for a canon character.
That's true too.
In the ways that we can use them.
Some people are really good at writing canon characters, and some people, you know, are just, I mean, there's fan service and then there's story use of something. And
sure. And that was something that I went through when I was making my holodeck programs over on the KDF side, because I was writing dialogue for Kang, Kor, and Koloth, which of course are three very different characters, but all three Klingon. So you have, with all that brings with it, but three very different reactions to things, and you had to try and get that pitch right. Of, you know, Kor is sort of the bellicose, you know, honor and the glorious death, and you know, let's slaughter our enemies and then go have a drink. And the other two are not like that, but they're still Klingon. So, you know, and of course Klingons are fun to write for, but I think hard to write for at the same time, because you can make them sort of too cliche, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't always talk about honor and glory and food. They, you know, sometimes talk about boring things like how precisely the navigation deflector is out of alignment.
Yeah, they would have to. And there was one mission I played recently, and I cannot remember the name of it. It was the last time when we were playing KDF missions, where the player had your engineering boff go through a whole big long explanation, and it sounded very smart and not sound at all Klingon. Not sound at all like you would normally imagine Klingon. But we do see that in the shows where the Klingons, you know, they have to be very technically adept, as well as warriors.
Of course.
Good episodes in TNG along that. One of them had this guy named Jadan, who was a Klingon scientist who, well, when you listen to the guy talk, if you close your eyes and don't know who the character was, you would not know that he was a Klingon just by listening to him, because of the fact that, you know, he talks like a scientist. Then you have this one, I forget her name, but it was in that episode where they have that, I forget the name of the race. This guy invents some sort of ship shield modification that lets the ship go into the corona of a star and fakes his own death. Well, one of the scientists helping him on the project was a Klingon.
Yeah.
Who, despite being a scientist, talks a lot like the way you would expect Klingons to talk from, you know, listening to Martok. She kind of talks like that, despite the fact that she's a scientist who is smarter than most humans.
And it's interesting, they kind of touch on in that episode the sort of uniqueness of and difficulty that she's faced being a Klingon female scientist, which is, you know, not something that their culture these days is really geared towards accepting.
Yeah. Of course, though, in her case, she's a scientist who knows how to do cool things with energy fields that make most people, almost wet their pants, even if they're Klingons.
Hey, science is a battlefield like any other.
Yeah.
Like diplomacy,
be,
like
right?
the courtroom. Yeah, that's how you would kind of write that Klingon. Science is a battlefield. But of course, and this is a conversation we were having on Twitter actually today with a few guys, is that there is a tendency in science fiction to write alien races, as sort of one note. There's one defining characteristic.
Yeah, the old alien monoculture thing.
Mm-hmm. On tvtropes.org, they call it the planet of hats. So you go to this planet, they all wear the same hat. That's how you define their culture. Or, if they're Klingons, they're all warriors. If they're Romulans, they're all deceitful and have pointy ears. You do yourself a favor if you don't write them like that. Right? Where, if you have two Klingons in your mission, make them vastly different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I did when I was making my diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant mission is I had two main Vorta NPCs that you interact with in the mission. One of them is Loris, who is more of a diplomat type. Sure, she'll take a heavy-handed approach to diplomacy, but she's a diplomat first, and she doesn't really do fighting. She leaves that for other people. Then, just because I wanted to have somebody, also partly because it's, a KDF mission, and KDF missions that don't involve, glorious battle or boring. I put in this one that there was a new character that I came up with named Endless, who the other Vorta have no idea where she came from, and are to a certain extent scared of her because of the fact that, well, she has a bad temper, and this is someone who has a bad temper by Klingon standards. And I actually wrote the character so that she threatens to kill the player several times over the course of the mission. Which, let's face it, Vorta, yes, they'll threaten to kill people. They're not going to threaten to beat you to death with their bare hands, though.
Yeah, they tend to threaten to have other people kill you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. I mean, playing against type is always good. Confounding expectations as to cultures.
I think that's an important part of the dialogue question, too, is your NPCs have to sound different. Your villains need to be distinct from each other. Your allies need to be distinct from each other and offer you different things and offer you different types of individuals to interact with. Damar was very different from Dukat. That kind of thing.
And got more different as you got to know him.
Exactly. As the character was more revealed, we began to see what a very, and that was through his dialogue.
And he started off as this sort of, toady, a henchman who happened to have a name, and as you got more to know him, he became, I think, one of my absolute favorite characters in Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and he was a very different. He was also a villain. He was also filling that role, but he was very different from the other villains we were seeing.
And became sort of one of the. You'd almost call him an anti-hero, a hero who does what he does because of guilt.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing to ponder here is comparing Gul Macet with Gul Dukat.
Again, you're looking at the dialogue establishes such different characters. I think it's
even though it's the same actor.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Macet is another one of those that's absolutely a favorite character of mine, because that's my absolute favorite episode of Trek, bar none.
Really?
The Wounded, yeah.
Huh.
And of course, it's the same actor as Gul Dukat, but played very differently, very differently. And of course,
there are a couple of actors that they had, that were quite capable of that. So,
another good example is John Fleck, who not only did he play a Suliban in Star Trek Enterprise, but he played two different Romulans in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. One of which
you'd never know it.
Yeah. One of which was let's just say that he was a bit of an antagonist, but he wasn't one of the diabolically evil antagonists. He's the kind of guy who has, shall we say, different goals than yours, but it's not that his goals aren't honorable, it's that his goals conflict with yours.
And he has a certain amount of, I don't know, ruthlessness,
Well,
you might call it.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking of the same guy, this is the one who's like the head of the Tal Shiar, right? From when Dr. Bashir goes to Romulus?
I think
Is
so,
that what
yeah.
you're thinking of?
I think that's who it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a bit of trouble keeping the two apart because, I don't remember their names.
Well,
I'd have to...
This is good, though, because kind of transitioning in from Greendragoon's question into what I was wanting to talk about is how do you write for Romulans? Because obviously a lot of us are going to be facing that. And Romulans are sort of portrayed very inconsistently on the show. I mean, they keep telling you that Romulans are passionate people, but a lot of them that you see are sort of cold and calculating. I mean, there's a few like Commander Toreth who's very, very angry all the time. And then there's some like the guy that we're talking about who's very cold and calculating and almost logical, almost Vulcan.
Well, there's the Romulan commander from Balance of Terror. That guy had to have had ice water running through his veins instead of blood, the way he acted in that episode.
Are we talking about the guy who was played by the guy who played Sarek?
Yeah, Mark Leonard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably one of my favorite Romulan portrayals over the years, because he sort of portrayed it as, he was somebody. He wasn't a warmonger, but he was somebody who was dealing with warmongers and was being under orders from warmongers. But he was a very fair-minded guy. He was, it's it's that dueling starship captains where they're almost, they're very the same, and he even says it, in another universe, Kirk, we could be friends.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he also talks about feeling like he had Kirk in his head, despite the fact that there was no communication between them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was that sort of thing that was invoked by Master and Commander, which is, the dueling ship captains. They never speak except for at the end, but, they figure each other out.
Yeah.
Well, there's one big thing that they did in the episode is that Kirk used this tactic of following the Romulan ship to hide his presence, even though he didn't have a cloaking device, to make it look like Kirk's presence was a sensor echo, which fooled everybody on the Romulan ship, except the commander. He looks at it like, no, wait, no.
Yeah,
no,
he knew, and he was trying to string him along, trying to play into that. So
yeah.
He's a smart cookie, that Romulan commander.
Yeah.
Shame they killed him off.
I know.
That's one of those characters you're like, oh, you guys could have done so much more if he'd been recurring.
Yeah, well, apparently he did so well he showed up again as Spock's father, so I consider that a promotion.
His more iconic portrayal, I suppose.
Yeah.
More iconic character. But Hippie, before we disconnected, we were talking. I posed the question, transitioning from Greendragoon's question, is how do you write for Romulans?
Ooh.
And it's a challenge.
How do you write for Romulans? They're as different from Federation line of thinking as the Klingon line of thinking or the KDF line of thinking is different.
Well, I get the impression that the Romulans have a very strong sense of loyalty. So, I mean, even if they disagree with something, they will go along with their superiors out of loyalty. And in a sense, different from Klingons' sense of honor, you could almost say.
And yet there's so much backstabbing.
True. They can also be very
Opportunistic.
So this is going to sound really strange, and I can actually explain it, because I agree with Dragoon that I think they have this incredible sense of loyalty, but I don't think they have an incredible sense of loyalty to each other. I don't think that any two Romulans ever consider them, they may be friends, but the loyalty I think they feel is to the Empire. That they have this incredible sense of who they are as defined by who the Empire is, and that anything they do, even when they when the first officer stabs the captain in the back, because they're doing it possibly some for self-promotion, but I believe that there's probably always a thought of this is for the good of the Empire. That's always part of the rationalization, and that loyalty, I believe, is to the Empire. It makes me think of Romulans like Captain America, because during a famous Captain America story, it was actually written by one of my favorite authors, by the guy who wrote Babylon 5. It was written by Straczynski. That there was a line where you know your truth, and it was. I don't have the exact line. I could find it and quote it maybe when we, in a comment on the show notes or something. That your job is when everyone else is wrong, to plant yourself by the river of truth and say that no, you move. And I believe that that's how Romulans see their empire. They see their empire as like the river of truth that they will plant themselves beside and say that this is the way.
I don't know. I kind of see Romulans as being, in many ways, very similar to Vulcans, except for the fact that Romulans, well, one, they won't admit to being as similar to Vulcans as they really are. Well, one of the defining characteristics to me of Romulans is that they tend to almost always think things through before doing anything. I mean, because it goes back to the Romulan commander from Balance of Terror. He spent the entire episode trying to outthink Kirk. I mean, despite the fact that he knew that he had a weapon that could blow Kirk's ship out of space, he didn't simply go in guns blazing and try to take him out. He tried to lure him into an ambush to make his victory more certain.
Plus, the whole idea of them going into the neutral zone was to provoke, essentially to make these secret attacks and provoke the Federation into attacking them, so that it would look like the Romulans had cause for war. I mean, they're chess masters. They're thinking 10, 12 steps ahead, or they're trying to anyway. Doesn't always work.
Yeah. So what if we take this into the specific and look at a couple of specific Romulans? For instance, Tomalak. I mean, how would you break down his motivations, his attitudes?
No, I don't honestly remember a lot about Tomalak. Are there particular episodes that he's really heavily in?
Well, he actually showed up in 4 episodes, which is kind of surprising, but considering that
that's a number.
It was the next generation, and they didn't have recurring guest characters in the next generation all that often.
Yeah, not to the extent of later shows.
That did that.
He's still a presence, and he's somebody that people remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was Andreas Katsoulis. He was awesome.
Yeah, it's hard to not remember him.
Yeah. I mean, he always kind of struck me as he's very boisterous when he's confronted, but at the same time, there's always that look in the back of the mind that he's thinking out the possibilities.
Kind of figured he was acting. That's a front that he's putting on.
I kind of get that. I mean,
that over-the-top scenery-chewing villain is a front.
He definitely seems like a Romulan who's very much interested in self-promotion.
Yeah.
Also, he's the kind of guy who, whenever you're talking to him, either you pay very close attention to what he's saying, or he leads you to believe something other than what he's actually saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because in his first encounter that he showed up, flew a Diderodex through the neutral zone to recover a Romulan scout ship that had crash-landed on the planet of Bornton Core. He spent most of his appearances in that episode trying to talk Picard into going away and leaving him alone, despite the fact that, in theory at least, a Diderodex should be able to take on a Galaxy-class starship with a reasonable chance of winning.
I think they were mostly described as kind of evenly matched.
Yeah. So, I mean, he didn't want to fight necessarily, but he knew that, he might have to. But again, like I said, he was using that as a backup plan rather than his primary strategy.
All right. So here's another one, Sela. I mean, what do you think of her character? And I would say she's
a
more
snake.
complex.
She's a coiled viper.
Yeah. But I think there's more to it.
She might look non-threatening, but she could strike at any moment.
I would almost go as far as to say that she is a character who carries around a lot of anger. I mean, you see on a number of occasions where
absolutely.
she will just try to kill you by looking at you.
Yeah.
Well, among other things, she is very unhappy about the circumstances of her early childhood. Enough about the way her parents came together to be unhappy about that, and she's even more unhappy about the fact that her mother was unhappy enough living wherever it was to attempt to escape. And that, kind of gave her this massive amount of emotional trauma, and to a certain extent she kind of sort of hates the Federation because of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was always kind of disappointed that they never took her character further. Because, I mean, it seems like she's got these unresolved issues that at some point down the road she would eventually have to deal with.
She's another one.
Maybe that's
like a lasting
maybe
effect.
that's some of what we're going to see.
Yeah.
Maybe, I hope so.
I mean, we've got not only the character, but we've got the actress who portrayed the character portraying her in games. So maybe that's what we're going to see.
And from what we've heard, it seems like Denise Crosby does have some ideas about where Sela and Tasha would have
If you
gone.
saw that video, yeah.
I get the feeling that she enjoyed playing Sela a lot more than Tasha.
Yeah. I think there's more.
I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily have any evidence for that, but I just get that feeling.
And I mean, it kind of throws it into a skew slightly because she's half human, so she's not completely Romulan.
So one thing when you're talking about writing for Romulans that occurs to me is you need to kind of write for one trap I've seen in playing. I've played a lot of KDF missions, and one trap that I see people fall into is the whole idea that just because the KDF is different, you write the mission differently. But the truth is that no matter how you're experiencing it from the role of the hero of the story. Nobody ever thinks of themselves as the villain, no matter what they're doing. That's one of those classic tropes. I don't know what, the villain doesn't think what they're doing is villainous necessarily. Maybe, in the extreme cases, so you've got to kind of write when you're thinking Romulan or KDF, you've got to write with that hero, that character, the player character is the hero of your story. And they have to, that approach, the dialogue, the motivations, everything behind it, the people that they interacted, I feel like it has to be approached from the point of view that the player character is always the hero, no matter who they are or what race they're playing.
And of course, all of your NPCs think that they're the hero. I know, John, you're a fan of Firefly, right?
Oh, a big one.
Yeah. You ever watch the director commentaries?
Oh, yep.
There's a great one in the pilot episode of Firefly where he's talking to Jane. Of course, Jane is, he's a main character, but he's a secondary character. He's not the hero of the story. And they were doing a scene, and Joss Whedon goes up to him. He says, "You think you're the hero of this story? Play it like that."
Mm-hmm.
So it's, all of your secondary characters, they think they're the most important person in the universe, whether they'll come out and say it, whether they'll admit it to themselves. Well, everybody thinks they're the hero of their own story.
There are no weak characters on that show.
That's the key. And it's not just that everybody thinks that they're the hero of their own story, because quite honestly, we are all the hero of our own story. We are all the point of view character of our own story that we're walking through. In real life, and then when we're writing for a story-based game, our hero is the main character of that story. So
absolutely. Which is why I often fall into the trap of putting the dialogue for the captain as things that I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to add something extra to what they said. It definitely sounds of it with betraying a Romulan. It's probably going to need to sit down and do the homework with it. Watch the episodes, probably read the Titan series and stuff like that. But absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised if one or two people in a Foundry mission go, "It's a fake."
We're probably going to see that.
We're going to see a lot of that.
I wonder. I'd like to see someone explore that story.
Yeah, Vreenak's a very interesting one.
Yeah, it's really
one of my
important
favorites.
guy because he was a very cool guy to see in action.
You could kind of call him a one-scene wonder. He sort of stole that episode.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is a fantastic episode. It's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course,
yeah. I looked up the character played by John Fleck, and it was Koval.
Oh, right on.
Koval was a high-ranking Tal Shiar agent who was apparently secretly working with Section 31.
Oh, is that he's that guy that Section 31 maneuvered to get instated that Bashir thought was the bad guy, but Section 31
they were actually
tricked
after
him into
senator or something like
exposing the senator he trusted, and then got her in trouble.
Wheels within
wheels.
The
plot summary I see on Memory Alpha has it that Koval was pretending to hate the Federation so that people wouldn't suspect him of being a Federation sympathizer, and that he was really out to do was to discredit Kimara Kretak and take her place on the continuing committee, which would put him in a position to help the Federation from the inside of the Romulan government, which, let's face it, that's about as sneaky and underhanded as a motivation for anything as you can ever get.
Mm-hmm. It's that chess master thing. It's the, thinking so many moves ahead that nobody can figure out exactly what you're doing.
Exactly.
Oh, Kretak is another interesting Romulan. She appears in earlier episodes, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm. She's in that bit with where she does that standoff with Kira, putting weapons on the Bajoran moon.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of interesting because she definitely will not back down on that situation. I mean, until Admiral Ross steps in. But at the same time, we never get close enough to her to figure out how she views the whole situation. I mean, was this an attempt by the Romulans to basically establish a military outpost in the Bajoran sector, or was it legitimately just a defend their hospital?
And it's funny because she always seems like a very genuine, as genuine a Romulan as you'll ever find. But of course, there might be these things going on behind the scenes, or there might not.
Well, another thing to consider about the Romulans, though, is that attempting to pigeonhole their motives to being singular motives is probably a mistake. Because, like you said, with the whole thing with the plasma torpedoes being installed on that moon, what's to say that they didn't do that for several reasons instead of having only one single reason for it?
That could very well be.
Well, interestingly enough, reading on Memory Alpha, she was portrayed by two different actresses.
Mm.
One in the two-parter opening season 7, and then way at the end of season 7, where Bashir's on Romulus, a different actress.
Oh yeah,
I had no idea.
And Adrian Barbeau.
That's okay. I choose to believe that all the Vulcan priestess in the TOS movies are T'Pau, despite the fact that they were all played by different women.
Hey.
I don't know. All I know is I felt really bad for her at the end of the...
Yeah, she got kind of the shaft there, didn't she?
Because, they built her up and they eventually formed this connection between her and Bashir. And then she totally gets screwed over.
Mm-hmm. But I think you're absolutely right, Mark. I think this is the Romulans are one of those that's sort of ripe for writing each character in very, very different ways.
I agree.
And one of the few Romulans to receive a first name. So maybe, I don't know, first names are not common among Romulans, or it's one of those things where they don't tell you their first name unless you really get to know them.
Well, it's kind of like with Elam Garrick,
who's the only Cardassian to have a first name ever, I think.
No.
Navrantane.
Oh, right, yeah.
What I was getting at is that Elam Garrick and his father used different family names.
Well, I think that was intentional.
Yeah, I think he was hiding his son because he knew his son would be used against him and could be a weakness.
Kind of what I was getting at is that Romulans typically don't tell you their first name unless they have a reason to want to. The rest of the time, they just simply don't bother with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, then there's always the old concept that knowing one's name gives someone power over you. So, I mean, I don't think it's taken quite that literally, but it's one of those things that they're not going to give you any information about them that they. I mean, it would be something intimate. Remember
that's the detail you could put in your Foundry mission. You get
remember
to know Romulan so well, you get his first name.
Romulan commander from
no name.
From the Enterprise incident, and she gets very close to Spock and actually tells him her name. And he comments on it, but we never find out what it is.
Different episode from what I was thinking. Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, it shows that first names are something very intimate for Romulans.
That's a character trait you could use in a Foundry mission.
Speaking of that, though, is that in the case of Kamara Kretak, we found out her first name because someone else used it, not because she used it. Because one thing I just noticed in here is that we found out her name because Neral used it when he was talking, not because she used it.
You'd almost think that might be a little bit of a faux pas, a social faux pas is, shouldn't say anybody else's first name. You should allow them to give it if they wish. Maybe. Maybe. Just speculation.
I think Neral used it in the episode where because remember how they did that how Cobalt did that whole scheme to get Kamara Kretak removed from power. Neral used her first name as part of a, I guess you could say, legal proceeding against Kretak.
I couldn't remember where it was in the episode.
So it's almost kind of almost a dressing down or being thrown bare, so to speak.
Like when your mom is angry at you and she uses your full name.
Yeah,
well, yeah, but I mean, it's almost like having all your secrets stripped from you.
Yeah.
It's basically having your privacy violated.
Yeah, I guess.
And we are interested in Romulans.
Yeah, obviously.
It's
it sounds like a totally great faction.
Yeah, they should add this faction.
I think what I'm really. Oh wow! Really?
What a great idea! I thought of it first.
I think I'm really looking, because we're just looking at a whole different kind of storytelling from a lot of people. The Romulan approach to things is gonna bring about people telling all different kinds of stories, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Let's see. You guys got any other
pressing topics?
Woody Valley, did you have anything? I mean, since you're the guest here.
Yeah.
No, it's about all I was covering, basically.
It's just the Romulans are big on my mind this week because of what they got released.
I mean, that's the main thing I've been doing in Stowe since the announcement came, is I've been going back and playing the old Romulan missions.
That's not a bad plan. I definitely am paying attention to the post of history that you've been adding and what people have been adding to it. I'm going
to have some more for that.
Been so long since I played those missions that I don't really have anything to add at the moment. But
well, that was exactly my my thought. And when I was initially playing those missions, of course, because leveling is so different now, it's easy to skip a lot of those missions, is to go through and think about them critically and think about how all these events fit together. And you start to get a sort of picture of a very fragmented society.
Yeah.
Very fractionalized.
I was just thinking about that a part where Stila shows up and gets abducted by the Iconians.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Spoilers.
No, it's not a spoiler.
That thing's been out for years. It's not a spoiler anymore.
It's not a spoiler anymore, but someone might just be starting the game. Not a spoiler.
Too bad, we ruined it for you.
Well, what I was stopping and thinking about is, what does Stila say to you when she suddenly warps into the system?
Something about being in violation, or something about against the Romulan Star Empire.
Way I remember, it's kind of long and wordy, but it can be summed up as, you're Federation, you're in Romulan space, get out or die.
Well, she only gets a little tiny mini contact window. She doesn't get a full contact window.
Well,
it's like, single sentence announcement.
Well, 2 or 3 single sentence announcements, I think, but yeah, it's not a whole lot of text, but it kind of, when you stop and think about it in the larger context of the Romulan FE series, she's basically kind of reacting to the fact that you're there, not so much to the fact that she doesn't know what you're there for.
Well, I mean, I think at the time it was kind of to make it ambiguous as to whether or not she was there to support the Tal Shiar, or whether she was just there because there were Federation people in her space.
Yeah, of course, I don't think she necessarily... I mean, she might ally with the Tal Shiar for common interest, but, she's military. She's not Tal Shiar. She's never going to trust them. So she may support them if she feels it's best for her.
Also, she has good reasons to, not like the Tal Shiar and want them to go away.
Well, the Tal Shiar definitely need to get killed.
Well, I mean,
with extreme prejudice.
One of the things that the former leader of the Tal Shiar tried to do was that he apparently set Stila up to get, executed for assassinating the previous leader of the Tal Shiar.
And then Donatra stepped in and got her exiled instead of executed.
Yeah.
We're still not quite sure what the motivation was on that.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it shows up in the past of 2409 data stuff
without really much explanation.
They don't go into great detail and explain the precise circumstances, so we don't actually know who assassinated the one Tal Shiar leader,
or Telora, the senator who murdered the whole Senate back in Nemesis. We don't know who assassinated her.
Yeah, she got assassinated. The person who was at the time the chairman of the Tal Shiar blamed Stila. Then
Stila blamed the unificationists, didn't she?
I think so, yes. But the previous leader of the Tal Shiar blamed Stila. Then shortly after that, his house gets blown up, and he's presumed dead, even though no one was ever able to find his remains. After that, Stila is officially blamed for killing him, too, which eventually leads to her getting exiled.
Of course, we don't know what happened necessarily when she was exiled, other than that I think she made contact with a Hippiejohn.
Yeah.
And possibly this, quote, silent enemy that's coming in Season 8.
It's got to be the Iconians.
Well,
it's certainly possible. Those ships don't look quite Iconian, though. I mean,
I was going to say, that's
compared
to
the one that we've seen.
From what I've seen of the silent enemy, they're probably the Romulan equivalent of the Fekleri, which is more or less, monster enemies that show up to annoy this one specific race because they happen to be next to them.
Although
somebody
I suppose we're seeing-
suggested that they might be the Herc.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Eh,
Though
Yeah.
that ties into Klingon myth more.
yeah,
So-
the Herc
They say it's Klingon season.
seems unlikely. The
They
Herc
say there's
seems
tons of
unlikely.
well, they don't say there's tons, but they keep saying
They
there's
say there's
Klingon content
one
too.
to 50.
Yeah.
Must be some
Yeah.
content there.
It's actually one question I wouldn't mind asking is, do you guys think there's enough done for the Klingons with this one? Because it's, we spend most of the time talking about the Romulans, but you guys reckon it'd be, enough to revive the Klingons with
Here's-
what's coming
Depends
up?
on-
I do.
Yeah.
We don't
I
know, do we?
100% do. I think based on everything that I have heard them say in interviews over the past, I want to say 6 to 8 months, I do. I think that I haven't gone back and looked, and I probably should because I keep saying that, it makes a difference to my way of thinking. But when it comes back to me that when Dan Stahl came back, he made it a point to say that he wasn't someone within the PR made it a point to say that they weren't going to announce ideas and things that are on the whiteboard without being really clear about things that aren't planned. And they started talking about getting new members of their team a long time ago and getting those people up to speed and getting them working on new things. And we haven't seen new things that necessarily have come from new members of the team. We've heard about people now also working on the ship design with Jams. We've heard about other people working on, in the same office as Thomas the Cat, but we haven't really known what these people are doing. So I personally think that ever since they started getting these people up to speed, they have been working on the Klingon faction. Stahl has said that it's been his personal goal to make it a full faction for a really long time. They've boldly announced previously that this season is going to be about Klingon story content as well. And I think that the idea of the third faction is obviously the biggest change to kind of the core of the way the game plays. It's going to change everything. But I think along with it, in the next 2 months, we're going to see a whole lot of dev blogs about upcoming Klingon content, about the fact that the story is getting filled out. I mean, we had Kestrel at one point talking about that whole idea of the Gorn storyline. If you listen to the Gorn in the First City, there's kind of a story already there. And I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff filled out. I don't know how many new ships and such that we're going to see, but I get the feeling we're going to see a whole lot of new Klingon story, and I think it's going to make me personally very happy.
Well, I mean, the Klingons already have ships for levels 1 through 24, right?
Yeah.
They had it from before, right?
Oh, yeah, because it launched with
Yeah.
all of that. It doesn't necessarily enough content because
So, in theory,
the idea is behind it was supposed to be a PvP faction.
You can still
Except it
completely
didn't
level
work out.
characters that way.
You can.
You can completely level characters with PvP on the KDF side.
I would be incredibly shocked if Cryptic reintroduced the 1 to 24 levels without addressing the issue
Oh yeah, they've
for
got
which
to have
they
something.
removed it.
They got to have something because not everybody wants to PvP, but people want to play Klingons.
Right. I think they have the story I really
I am one of those people. I'm not a PvP fan.
I'm of the opinion that when they released they kind of didn't let us know how amazing the 3rd anniversary episode was going to be. I mean, fully voice acted, that's expensive. Do they have that kind of budget now? Have they really been seeing that many new players that they're able to put a whole lot of voice acting into this season?
Actually, one thing to consider, though, is that all of the people, with one exception, that I noted for the voice acting were people that I'd seen do voice acting in other episodes before that.
Yeah, but they still have to pay these guys when they come in and do voices. So I mean, are looking at a Cryptic that has that kind of money now, that we're going to see some really amazing stuff. That what comes next is just that was just the tip of the iceberg. That what comes next is even more amazing. Is even better.
Yeah, that's the one nice thing, is that they literally promised more content than I thought was possible with it. And the best part is that, I mean, unless for some reason this expansion completely blows up and 1 million people walk out of the game or something, all of those people that are producing all of this incredible amounts of content are not going anywhere once the expansion launches.
Yeah,
they're still part of the
producing stuff.
I mean, Dan has, been actually very clear about that. Stowe has been doing very well. I mean, he gave the 2 million accounts.
I don't think he can be clearer. I don't think as a company they can be clearer about saying, look, Star Trek Online is doing really well.
He has gone out and said that Stowe is the top performing North American based game for Perfect World.
For Perfect World, yeah.
I mean, he did say that they're not throwing out PWI or Forsaken World or anything, but at the same time,
it's a whole different market. They admit that that's a whole different market.
But that's China. I mean, it's basically China where those two games get their money from. Yeah,
so bringing this back around to the Foundry.
Oh yeah.
If they and it's a good discussion, because if they have introduced all this stuff to the Klingons, maybe they will get a lot more Klingon players. Maybe we will get more Foundry plays from Klingons.
Right. That's
certainly can't hurt.
There's something else I want to also bring up with the Foundry and Klingon stuff is it really needs some more Klingon-style items in the Foundry. I'm starting to find, to create something diversely Klingon, it's very limited with the amount of items in there. It's only like a handful of generators, handful of consoles, and that's pretty close to being about it. There's nothing extra there. Of course, a couple of, maps and stuff like that are, like a Klingon city and stuff like that, but it
gets a bit repetitive.
Yeah. It's even with my last mission I made, the Honor and Delivery, and even this particular mission, Beautiful, I'm working on, I was actually finding it a little bit frustrating and annoying that trying to find some unique Klingon items just wasn't there. I had to, in some ways, I actually had to improvise and cover over a console with a Klingon console to create a data center type thing. So I'm hoping, it's bringing in a whole heap of new stuff into the Foundry and stuff like that, but it hasn't really hit anything in a way of Klingon yet. So there's something I'm a bit worried about is they're going to have a big influx of Romulan items, skins and stuff like that, but we're still going to get nothing with the Klingons. That's the thing, because I've been a little bit vocal about this here and there. Do they have the big enough dev team to handle a third faction? That's something I was very, very concerned about, because, we have something new pretty much once every 4 to 6 months, roughly. They spend a lot of time on it, probably spending 10-hour days, 6 days a week doing this, to try and push this out. Do they have a big enough dev team, because sure, I don't mind them, doing content and stuff like that, but I'm very concerned that they're wiping out their social time and, for the ones who got married into the 2.4 kids, their time with the family and stuff like that, because eventually somewhere along the line doing all the amount of hours just to produce something, it's going to hurt a lot down the track with their personal lives. So, do they have a big enough dev team to handle a third faction?
I suppose that's kind of a wait and see,
And a QA team to, handle all the bugs.
That I don't think they have yet.
No.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the answer is I can accept the fact that, you know, as the Foundry, we're kind of the last, you know, third or fourth thought, the redheaded stepchild, you know, that I can accept that we're not, you know, part of, you know, the decision of is the dev team big enough, you know, does the Foundry get supported? When we can, sure we will. That's just kind of what we've been told. So
at least right now.
Yeah, at least for right now, that's, you know, that's kind of, so what the question about is the dev team big enough to support 3 factions, part of that question is there a QA team along with that? You know, they're part of that dev team, even though, you know, I hear QA is not a dev. You know, I've heard people say that, but they're part of that whole team of making, I would too.
They are assigned to the STO team.
Yeah, they're part of that team of making sure that the product is good and the product works. So, do they have a big enough team to support
I
all
think
the
we're seeing
parts?
maybe some evidence of perhaps a bigger QA team. I mean, we've seen a guy who is essentially, I'm sure he has probably other duties, but part of his job is to deal with Foundry QA and dealing with our bugs, helping replicate and identify.
Yeah, we've had that since the beginning of the year, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've already seen the fruits of his labor. I was noticing as I was playing the Foundry last night is that, yes, the music fix is in there. The music plays.
Yeah, it is.
So we're already seeing the fruits of his labor. I mean, it doesn't come instantly, but...
Yeah, I mean, considering he managed to get this during a massive content push.
Yeah, I've seemed to take this, they're doing this big push because the players want this from that Dan Stall survey he did about 6 months ago, and he put that question in of, do you want a Romulan playable faction, do you want an upgrade of the Klingons, you know, and Foundry and a couple others there and stuff like that, you know, and the number 1 place was a playable Romulan faction, number 2 was a Klingon
Klingon content.
Yeah, I remember.
I
Foundry
voted
so
Foundry.
low on that one.
I voted Foundry personally.
Well,
Yeah,
obviously.
I voted Foundry.
That reminds me of something, though. Did you remember the comment about the yesterday's Enterprise clothing unlock item?
Yeah.
Well, there were 2 basics that the KDF player said about it. 1, yay, we have another clothing option. 2, they complained about the fact that all it was is a metallic strap thingy.
Yeah, because the belt has the Federation symbol on it.
Actually, that's just it, though, is that the clothing item doesn't actually come with a belt. You have to use a belt that matches it, and the Federation
No, it comes with a belt.
Yeah, it comes with that.
That comes with a belt.
It comes with a silver belt that has the sideways Federation chevron on it.
Maybe it does not on the KDF side.
No, it does. It does. I have it. I decided not to use it because I made it actually look good with, I think, the winter belt, surprisingly enough. But, yeah, it definitely has.
I was honestly a little disappointed by that costume offering. I mean,
so was I.
But, I mean,
It's
it was a
nice
nice
as
little throw-in
but
because the ship was the big surprise.
I was hoping for the Wrath of Khan variant with the no turtleneck underneath.
See, I was hoping for the next gen variant that they wore those straps on, that they had those the variant with the different cuffs and everything. Yeah, it was a little bit different. It had different cuffs and something different up near the shoulder pieces. I can't remember.
Yeah,
Will
V put a big post up about that. Sorry to interrupt.
The point I was making, though, is that they actually did give the KDF an additional clothing option for it as part of that, at the same time that they gave the same clothing option to the Fed. And, well, maybe it wasn't, necessarily a perfect implementation, but people complained about it anyways.
Well, people will complain about everything.
People will complain about it.
People complained about getting a free ship.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Okay, before we even know any details, people are complaining about getting a third faction.
Mm-hmm. What was that? It was like almost immediately there, a thread popped up that says, the Romulan Warbird needs a buff.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you possibly know what balance it will have?
They just assumed because it was a cruiser that it was underpowered.
Will indeed complain about anything.
Anything and everything.
Although, to be clear, the KDF does need a whole lot more of everything if it's going to be a full faction.
I don't think anyone would disagree with you, honestly.
Well,
I
wouldn't say everything.
No, top to bottom. They need more hairstyles. They need more uniform choices. They need more ship choices. They need more paint options.
I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more on both sides because they're all getting kind of stale now. To be honest.
Yeah, they're all getting kind of stale. But to be honest, I mean,
of course, I've played for 3 years, but I mean, not everybody has. So to be completely honest, it's the only problem I have with my KDF characters is that it's really hard to make them look interesting. Your color options are limited. Your choices are extremely limited. You know, whether it's for your ships, your costumes. For some people, for me included, how the game looks is important. I like my ships to look the way I want them to.
One complaint I've seen a lot for KDF is that for the KDF, you do not have any boot options that don't have spikes sticking out of them. Which I have to say is a rather realistic complaint.
I think there's maybe one, but it's like the very, I don't know, they're like tiny boots.
there are things on KDF
and they're not available for everyone.
Like shoes or sandals, those don't have spikes, but they're not really boots.
There's
also, if you
aliens.
Some ship costume pack that has boots that aren't spiky with it, but that's a lockbox item.
Yeah, but some races, Klingons can't get non-spiky boots. Apparently, all Klingons in the universe only wear spiky boots. But there are some races
on the shows wear spiky boots.
Yeah,
there are some.
Orions have the same boot options as Klingons do.
But Lethians, aliens, they can get.
There's a couple of options for them.
Spiky boots. Yeah, I think they're a reskin of one of the Federation items, or
but I think part of the problem is that they sort of inherited this issue from the shows. The shows did not have a huge variety of Klingon costumes. I mean, at least in the Next Generation era, until you go back to obviously they have the TOS. It's in there. You do not have some of the versions from like the movies that we saw, like General Chang's uniform or Chancellor Gorkon's uniform. You know, those sorts of things. Or
I'd like to see those.
What boots did the Klingons wear in TOS?
I'd have to go back and watch those episodes.
Yeah, I'd have to go
they
watch.
Showed Klingons from the waist down.
I don't remember that
the
Klingon boots have spikes in them from the TOS episode.
I would expect they didn't.
I mean, because the Klingons didn't wear clothing with spikes in TOS at all.
I would imagine the boots were actually really simple and
costumes.
Just your basic black boots.
But there are some more options that they could take from canon and stuff to expand.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, there absolutely is.
Original series Klingon boots did not have spikes. Nope, they did. Sorry.
Really?
At the very front, some of them, not all of them. Most of them, it looks like no, but some of them had small spikes at the very front.
Huh. And of course, if you watch the first time they appear in the Next Gen, the reason they have that spikes is because it's a hidden disruptor. It's pieces of hidden disruptor. And they just always have had them ever since.
They lock the Klingon guys to the brig. They start taking pieces off their uniform. Let's see here. Their belt buckles, the spikes off of their boots, and 2 or 3 other items hidden on their uniform get pieced together to make not only a disruptor pistol, but some sort of gadget for causing the security field in their holding cell to fail.
Now, if we had that option in Stowe, I would be fine with the spiky boots.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
So buy the costume
and I am wrong.
Feature?
And I am wrong. All of the images that I'm seeing from the actual show, no spiky boots. Everything that I saw that has little spikes on it is costuming or someone's interpretation. Yeah. In the show, it looks like they were just plain black boots, from what I can see. Anyway,
they didn't have the budget for spikes back then. They spent all their budget on the costumes for the women.
There you go. There's another costume you can get into the C-store.
Ooh!
There you go.
Here's a really good picture of TOS era Klingon boots. I'll have to copy paste it into the text box.
Yeah, link that for people. Wow, we are getting long.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna look. We've just gotten off on topics, but the Foundry led us to all of them.
And you can bring a lot back to the Foundry. Say, if we get these costume options for the extra costume options for the Klingons, for God's sakes, put them in the Foundry. Yeah.
Getting back to this though, is that you look at the picture of the Klingons on Organia. You see in that one picture something like, I don't know, 8 Klingons wearing pretty much exactly the same outfit.
Mm-hmm.
They have a sidearm disruptor pistol, a black shirt with a beige tunic over it. Note, the shirt and tunic, I believe we do have those as costume options.
We do.
We do.
The belt,
yeah, we have the complete original series options.
And we have the Foundry as well.
Yeah.
The pants, I'm not sure about, but probably. The boots we don't have, because if you look at them, they're basically like a knee-high version of cowboy boots almost.
It looks like they might have stuck them in the TOS Colonel's boots from the Starfleet.
Might be. I mean, it really might be. Who knows?
Crazy 60s,
The thing here, though, that caught my attention about this, though, is that we have 8 guys wearing nearly identical boots. So, kind of odd.
That's odd.
It's a little strange. Well, guys, I think we're going to stop here for the night. We are getting
I think this is gonna be heck for you to edit and make into a reasonable show. So,
well, we've had a couple of people have commented say, I was unhappy when it ended. So,
yeah,
okay.
Well, there they go. They're gonna have one this time.
before we go, I have had a request from Kirkvat. You know how he has the sort of the list of great missions down in the down the forums. He would like us to sort of look back through the missions that we've talked about and see if there's ones that we should add. So if you guys kind of think back to the ones that you've talked about on the show, and if there's any that you think ought to be on that list, go ahead and post in that thread.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll see if I can find it. Is that on the...
yeah, it's on the official Stowe forums.
Okay, I'll see what I can find.
Of course, you could always tell him in the chat room as well.
That's true.
Because he comes in every now and then.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's in the mission database forum on the official forums.
How great does he want him to be?
You'd have to ask him that.
I'm sure I'll hear about it anyways.
Yeah.
Well, that case then I'll just pick my own in that list.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, one thing to consider, though, is that they do actually play the missions before they stick them on the list of great missions.
Do they?
I hope they do.
I would. I mean, it's sort of Kirkvat's thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's his baby. So, all right, guys, we'll say good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Well, good night. As a final thought, I hope all this new stuff comes to the Foundry sooner rather than later.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Later.
All right.